The idea of never defending yourself sounds almost violent to the ego. It goes against everything we are taught about fairness, about justice, about standing up for who we are. From childhood, we learn that if someone misunderstands us, we should explain. If someone accuses us, we should correct them. If someone doubts us, we should prove them wrong. Over time, this becomes automatic, a reflex so deeply wired that we rarely question it. And yet, the older you get, the more you notice something unsettling. The people who explain themselves the most are rarely the ones with the most power. They are often the most exhausted, the most reactive, the most entangled in battles that never truly end. Machiavelli saw this clearly long before modern psychology gave us words for it. He watched men destroy themselves not through weakness, but through the desperate need to appear innocent, reasonable, or justified. He noticed how quickly authority eroded the moment a person began pleading for understanding. In his world and in ours, power does not respond to explanations. It responds to composure. It responds to those who remain standing when others rush to defend. Picture a moment of accusation, not dramatic, not theatrical, but subtle. A look exchanged between people. A sentence framed as a question but loaded with doubt. A comment said casually, yet designed to linger. You feel it immediately. The shift in energy, the quiet pressure to respond. This is where most people lose control, not because they are wrong, but because they are human. They rush to close the gap, to restore balance, to erase the discomfort. But Machiavelli would tell you that this discomfort is not a threat. It is an opportunity. When you defend yourself, you accept the premise that you are being judged. You step into a role where someone else has authority over the narrative. You may win the argument, but you lose something subtler. You lose altitude, because the person who explains is beneath the person who questions. The person who reacts is beneath the person who provokes. And even if no one consciously thinks this, everyone feels it. Silence, in contrast, breaks the script. It denies the accuser the satisfaction of control. It forces them to sit with their own words. It exposes the imbalance they tried to create. When you do not defend yourself, you are not saying they are right. You are saying their judgment does not automatically deserve your participation. And that distinction changes everything. There is something deeply unsettling about a person who does not rush to clear their name. It confuses people. It creates uncertainty. Humans are uncomfortable with uncertainty, especially when they expected power to flow in one direction and it suddenly stalls. The accuser begins to fill the silence, often revealing more than they intended. They repeat themselves. They escalate. They grow sharper, more emotional. Meanwhile, you remain still. And slowly, the room begins to notice who is truly in control. Machiavelli understood that most attacks are not about truth. They are about leverage. They are tests. How fast will you react? How much do you care? How easily can your emotions be pulled? When you defend yourself automatically, you answer all these questions for them. When you remain silent, you reveal nothing. You become difficult to read, difficult to predict, difficult to dominate. This is not weakness. It is discipline. It requires restraint in moments when restraint feels unbearable. It requires trusting time when your instincts scream for immediate relief. But time is the great ally of those who do not panic. Lies unravel. Projections exhaust themselves. Manipulation requires energy, and when it receives no return, it collapses under its own weight. There is also a transformation that happens inside you when you stop defending yourself. You begin to notice how much of your life was spent in self-justification, explaining your choices, clarifying your intentions, apologizing for misunderstandings that were never yours to fix. You realize how much mental space was occupied by rehearsing arguments that no one officially asked for, but that you felt compelled to prepare. When you let that go, something opens up. Your mind becomes quieter. Your sense of self becomes sturdier. Machiavelli believed that those who govern themselves cannot be easily governed by others. When you no longer need approval to feel secure, approval loses its power over you. When you no longer fear misunderstanding, misunderstanding loses its threat. You stop living as if your life is a courtroom and you are constantly on trial. You step out of that role entirely. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak from a different place. When you do choose to respond, it is not rushed. It is not emotional. It is not an attempt to convince. It is a statement, calm, measured, final. And because you have not been explaining yourself all along, your words carry weight. People listen not because you are loud, but because you are rare. Over time, people adjust to this version of you. Some drift away, frustrated that they can no longer provoke reactions. Others grow more respectful, sensing boundaries they cannot cross. You may be misunderstood by many, but deeply understood by a few. Machiavelli would say this is a fair trade. Power has never belonged to those who are universally liked. It belongs to those who are internally anchored. There is a cost to this path. Silence can feel lonely. It can feel like standing alone while others talk freely. But there is also a freedom in it that few people ever experience. The freedom of not needing to correct every false assumption. The freedom of letting your life speak instead of your mouth. The freedom of knowing that your worth does not rise or fall with every opinion expressed about you. In the end, never defending yourself is not about pride. It is about sovereignty. It is about choosing not to hand your center to anyone who challenges you. It is about understanding that true power is quiet, patient, and deeply grounded. Machiavelli did not teach people how to win arguments. He taught them how to survive perception, and in a world obsessed with judgment, that may be the most valuable lesson of all. As this lesson settles into you, it begins to change the way you interpret moments that once felt threatening. An accusation no longer feels like an emergency. A misunderstanding no longer feels like a fire that must be put out immediately. You start to see these moments for what they often are. Emotional probes, attempts to measure your stability, your need for approval, your willingness to bend. Machiavelli would say that most people are not attacked because they are weak, but because they are reactive. Reaction is an invitation. Silence is a closed door. There is a strange calm that arrives when you stop needing to be seen a certain way. You realize how little control you ever had over other people's perceptions to begin with. No amount of explanation ever truly guaranteed understanding. No defense ever fully protected you from being misjudged. Once you accept this, something inside you relaxes. You stop fighting an unwinnable war. You let opinions exist without trying to manage them. And in doing so, you reclaim energy that was never meant to be spent on constant self-justification. Machiavelli watched powerful men fall apart, not because they were exposed, but because they panicked when exposure was threatened. The fear of being seen incorrectly drove them to reckless explanations, unnecessary alliances, and public displays of innocence that only deepened suspicion. Those who endured were the ones who understood that perception is fluid. It shifts with time, with context, with behavior. They did not rush to correct it. They allowed it to evolve. When you stop defending yourself, people begin to watch your actions more closely. They look for inconsistencies. They wait for cracks. And when they do not find them, something subtle changes. The absence of defense forces a deeper form of evaluation. Instead of reacting to your words, they study your presence, your consistency, your choices. This kind of scrutiny is slower, quieter, and far more accurate. And it almost always works in your favor if you are grounded in who you are. There is also a quiet authority that comes from restraint, not the kind that demands obedience, but the kind that sets tone. When you do not rush to fill silence, others become aware of it. They feel the weight of pauses. They sense the conversation with you operates under different rules. This awareness makes them more careful, more intentional. You are no longer someone they can casually accuse, tease, or test without consequence. The consequence is discomfort, and most people avoid discomfort instinctively. Machiavelli understood that power often grows in the spaces between actions, in the moments where nothing happens outwardly, but everything shifts inwardly. When you hold your ground without explanation, you signal that your identity is not negotiable, that you do not need consensus to remain stable. This is deeply unsettling to those who rely on social pressure to assert control. There will be times when silence is misread as arrogance, when your refusal to defend yourself is labeled coldness or indifference. Machiavelli would remind you that labels are tools, not truths. They are used to provoke reaction, to pull you back into engagement. The moment you feel tempted to explain yourself to correct the label, pause. Ask yourself whether the explanation serves you or serves the person assigning the label. Often it is the latter. As you continue living this way, something unexpected happens. You become more selective not only with your words, but with your relationships. You gravitate toward those who do not require constant reassurance, those who understand you through presence rather than performance. You find relief in fewer connections that feel real rather than many that feel conditional. This narrowing is not loss. It is refinement. Machiavelli never promised peace. He promised stability, a kind of inner firmness that remains even when the external world is noisy and unfair. When you stop defending yourself, you accept that not everyone will see you clearly, and you decide that this is not a crisis. You allow ambiguity to exist. You allow others to sit with their interpretations, and you remain where you are, unshaken. In this way, silence becomes a form of authorship. You stop letting others write your story through provocation and reaction. You write it through action, through restraint, through time. And stories written this way tend to last longer. They do not rely on persuasion. They rely on presence. Eventually, you reach a point where the urge to defend yourself simply does not arise as often. Not because you have become detached, but because you have become secure. You know that your worth is not fragile. You know that truth does not need to be shouted to survive. And you know that power, real power, does not argue for its existence. As the years pass and the pattern of silence becomes second nature, you notice a profound transformation, not just in how others perceive you, but in how you inhabit the world. The energy once spent on arguing, justifying, correcting, and defending yourself has been reclaimed. You walk into rooms with a calm that is no longer performative. It is innate. People sense it instantly, though they cannot always name it. Conversations shift subtly in your presence. Those who sought to provoke hesitation or doubt find themselves navigating a space they cannot control. The power you never displayed loudly now hums quietly, undeniable in its constancy. There is a strange beauty in this process because it forces both self-mastery and patience. You learn to let things unfold without interference. Accusations lose their edge, gossip fades, misunderstanding drifts away like smoke when you refuse to feed it with reaction. Machiavelli understood that in human nature, consistency and composure often outweigh immediate explanation. The person who is calm under pressure leaves a far stronger impression than the one who scrambles to defend themselves. And over time, that impression becomes reality in the eyes of the world. You also realize that silence flips the dynamics of power entirely. Those who once sought to define you begin to reveal themselves instead. Their motives, their insecurities, their need for control become visible simply because you refuse to provide answers. In that space, the narrative subtly shifts. They become the ones whose actions and words are scrutinized, while you remain steady, unshaken, and opaque. Authority, in its truest sense, rarely shouts. It exists quietly, undeniably, in the room without asking permission. And the final lesson of this discipline is profound. Defending yourself is rarely about truth. It is about the ego. An ego, when untethered, will fight to prove its worth, often at the cost of inner freedom. By stepping away from that need, by refusing to justify, explain, or rationalize, you reclaim control not only over your image, but over your inner world. You discover a kind of sovereignty few ever achieve, a life measured not by the validation of others, but by the consistency of your own being. In the end, Machiavelli's trick is not cunning or cruelty. It is clarity. It is the knowledge that power is most enduring when it is calm, when it does not chase approval, when it refuses to be baited by provocation. It is the realization that by never defending yourself, you allow the world to reveal the truth on its own, and in that revelation, you emerge untouchable. You no longer react to every attack because you have learned something deeper. The strongest position in any battle, social or otherwise, is to remain unmovable, silent, and entirely present. That is how authority whispers while others shout. That is how mastery lives quietly, and that is how power, real, unassailable power, flips, not through words, but through the discipline of restraint. Silence becomes your weapon, patience becomes your strategy, and self-possession becomes your shield. In the absence of defense, you find freedom. In the absence of reaction, you find authority. And in the stillness of your own presence, the world finally begins to move around you, not against you, but in recognition of a force that does not need to prove itself because it already exists. This is the essence of never defending yourself, the trick that turns accusation into observation, challenge into insight, and reaction into power. It is subtle, relentless, and infinitely patient. And it is the path to a sovereignty that cannot be taken, only earned through the mastery of yourself. You have learned it, and in that learning, you are no longer at the mercy of anyone's judgment. The world may speak, accuse, and speculate, but you remain steady, composed, and quietly sovereign. The power has flipped.